So it's been a tough 3 years. I think it's safe to say for all of us, especially those on the front lines of healthcare. And I think that patients have also obviously suffered during that period. And one of the themes of my talk is that what your care team is going through impacts you as patients. You can't divorce the two as much as you'd like to. And so a lot of what I'm going to sounds like it's what I'm going to say sounds like it's directed toward a healthcare team, but it's really directed toward you because it matters to your own health, how your healthcare team is doing. So in healthcare, there's a triad that I think is the focus of what we do. It's patients, it's family, and it's clinicians. There's other factors and stakeholders in healthcare. I am well aware of that. Insurance companies, regulators, all sorts of different people in our ecosystem. These are the ones that matter. But it's a hierarchy and separation that's really outdated, right? It used to be, when I first started in medicine, that I was the king of the castle on the healthcare triad. That's a separation that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't serve the needs of our patients, and it really doesn't even serve the needs of the caregivers anymore to have that kind of hierarchy in place. So what we have really focused on is trying to get back to the bedside, back to the personalized care that matters to really all of us in healthcare. And the shifting of this focus from physician-focused to patient-centered is an important priority. It was actually recognized very recently in the New England Journal of Medicine when they devoted an entire issue to the power of the patient voice. That is increasingly getting more and more airplay. It's vitally important for what we do because it's personalized care which looks out for the entire well-being of those who matter the most, which is the patients. So there are facts that have to be established in medical care, right? But we know that patients are a lot more than facts, right? They're a lot more than what's in their medical record. And as Amy pointed out, that's where the narrative part comes in. And we learn these facts about a patient's situation, and by focusing on those facts, it can be hard to empathize if a patient is just a set of data points. But there was a neuroscientist named Paul Zak who first talked about oxytocin, and that's the chemical neurotransmitter that's stored in our brains that's released when we make a connection to somebody, when we're empathetic, when we hold their hands, when we hug them. And I would encourage you to think about that as you develop relationships with your care team. It's vitally important. I've committed the things that I'm thinking about right now to the page, and luckily for you, I'm not going to go through all of that today. But I will say that writing, for me, and for some of my patients that I cared for, has been an important part of understanding really what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. And so as Amy mentioned, kindly mentioned, I wrote a book called Exhale. I recorded an audio version of the book and realized how little I like the sound of my own voice. Tried doing that for 20 hours. I got folks sending me pictures of them reading the book with their best friends or their favorite drink, better yet. I sat down next to someone reading my book on an airplane, true story, it was a first for me, and I couldn't resist, and I said, "How are you liking the book?" And she said, "I just started it, a friend gave it to me. I didn't have time to go by the magazine shop on the way to the airport, so I guess I'll read this." It kind of put into perspective the 3 years of work that's required to get a book out there. But I also got to see some old friends on book tour, drank a decent amount of red wine. I came as close as I would ever come to Matthew McConaughey in a Minneapolis bookstore, and I took this picture and sent it to all my friends, and my wife said, "Not really, no." So, who am I? Hear my story a little bit. So I'm the only son of a German immigrant. played a central role in my life. He gave me my medical diploma. He also got a liver transplant when I was mid-career, and it made me understand what families go through. Finally, I could see that side of it. It was important to me. I fell in love with transplant when I was a resident at Parkland Hospital, John Kennedy Parkland Hospital. It was there that I was on the kidney transplant service in 1990. They needed a volunteer on that service. My hand shot up, and the first night we did a kidney transplant, I was absolutely hooked. The patients, the caregivers, the adrenaline flow, I was attracted to every single aspect of it, but the thing I liked the most about it was the ultimate team sport. No one person can do it. You got to have the right team in place, and I know some of you are contemplating a transplant. We've talked to some folks in the hall about it. You're looking at a team. You're not looking at an individual. It's really important. So I showed up for most of my career at Stanford Hospital out on the left coast over there, and I really had, I thought, reached the pinnacle of what I could achieve as a transplant doctor, building that team out there. And it was vitally important for me to deliver the best care I could at that point. But there was a time when I was a little younger. You can tell by all the hair I had on this picture. And I want to tell you a story that I think drives home what we're talking about today. So Brian was one of our first patients. He was 19, shy, had a developmental disorder. I got to spend some time getting to know him and his situation. I heard his stories. I wanted the team to list him. I wanted to transplant this kid because he was special to me. So I presented the details of his case as we do, and I shaded the presentation so that people would really understand him as a person and not a lot of facts. And I highlighted his sweetness, his family support, and I downplayed his difficulties, his cognitive difficulties. So when I got into the room, I said he had some learning challenges. He has a committed family. He was compliant with his medical regimen. And everybody started really thinking about whether or not we should transplant this kind of guys. But these were buzzwords that I learned so that people could understand a patient as a human. We're not talking about a set of facts here, as a human. So when I said all of this, I was met with absolute silence. And I could tell the team didn't like the candidate so much. So eventually, after some tense back and forth and logistical conversations, we gave the go-ahead, and Brian, like everyone else, is more than the data in his medical charts. And patients like this is another one that we transplanted out when I was in California, it always got me back to the why of what we did. So as care team, we leave our own kids to take care of somebody else's kids a lot of the time, somebody else's family. But every time we had this kind of meaningful interaction with a patient, it really just brought us back to no matter what was happening in the hospital about why we do it. So, what do we need to do though? We need to connect emotionally with our patients. So when I was in medical school, the professors would say, the last thing you want to do is get too emotionally involved. The last thing you want to do. Okay, that's outdated thinking. We have to get emotionally involved. We can't do our jobs without being emotionally involved. And do you see doctors now, and did I work with doctors that were emotionally detached? Absolutely. But I don't think that we can actually teach that anymore to our younger colleagues. We've got to get emotionally involved in order to do our jobs. And we also have to understand that people have different backgrounds, socioeconomic status. They have different experiences interacting with the healthcare system. We need to be flexible in how we engage with them. We can't talk to the CEO of a tech company in California the same way we talk to a patient in New Orleans where I live that may not have that background. We've got to be more flexible in how we talk to patients. So we also, though, have to deliver bad news at times, hard truths. And we have to always offer hope to our patients, but a patient's right to know everything that we know should supersede our reluctance to tell them bad news. And I think a lot of the times, especially when we're dealing with serious lung conditions like pulmonary fibrosis, the tendency is not to tell these hard truths, but I really think we have to do a better job of doing that. So when I entered transplant, I realized quickly, this was in the early 1990s, it's a human endeavor performed by people with powerful attributes, profound flaws, and it's a very human experience. It's not like making a computer or selling, tech equipment. It's a very human endeavor, and I think those of you that are going through the process will figure that out. It's an imperfect process, and a lot can go wrong, but there's care teams all over the country that are doing the best they can to prevent that. So when Brian, the patient I was telling you about earlier, first came in for consultation, there was a few things that I noticed about him, and your doctors are looking at you, noticing that about you too. I noticed the way his mother, at age 19, still held him close. And it was obvious she was familiar with guiding him through stressful situations. And I could tell that she loved and understood him in a way that only somebody that's taken care of a sick child could, night after night after night. And I had seen this same interaction many times, but it is an example of how a patient's background and what happens outside of the clinic room greatly informs what the care team, how the care team responds to them. And so it's always something to this patient I would sort of remember. So there are times, though, that inside the hospital walls, we hear about patients who actively engage, who push back, who ask a lot of questions. How are they deemed by the care team? Difficult. So they're thought of as an impediment to our ability to deliver care. But so often the caregivers are the ones that understand the day-to-day needs of a patient and bring crucial perspective on a patient's emotional and physical status. So I would say to the family members out there, don't be silent, speak up, make sure that the care team hears your voice. Your voice is really important. So, if we're going to talk about healthcare, we have to talk about money. So, we're trying, many of us are trying as best we can to put the humanity back in healthcare. We've lost some of that. I think most would agree on that. Our system is really not a system. It's a diffuse set of fragmented profit centers. That's what healthcare is now. I mean, we can beat around the bush, but let's not. So we're in danger of losing the soul of medicine, and it worries me quite a bit. And instead, replaced by this unruly behemoth that's not efficient, it's not equitable, and for a lot of patients, I'm sure many of you that have navigated the system, it's frankly unmanageable. And I think that that's the biggest struggle we have right now in healthcare. And I think this is due to many factors. Insurance companies dictate patient care. The clinicians that are working are overscheduled. And there's consistent placement of profit over purpose. And I think that our job then is to get back to the bedside, get back to one-on-one care, and making sure that no matter how the system treats us, we have to treat our primary stakeholder, which is the patient. And that's what I think a lot of us are trying to do. So we need to spend as much time listening to our patients as we do to tending to the electronic medical record, which I think is a major driver of not only dissatisfaction among clinicians, dissatisfactions among patients. I mean, how many of you have been in an office or a clinic room lately and just seen the back of a head of somebody typing? Okay, yep, that's what we're doing. So that's a difficult thing to teach younger doctors. And I've spent a career trying to teach physicians as much as I can. But one of the most valuable tools is to be able to draw out a patient's experience and really get them talking. It's an incredibly valuable tool. It used to be that the medical interview was a real pillar of the interaction with patients, but now it's, what brings you here today, no eye contact, responses are typed into a computer, not exactly a warm and fuzzy feeling. So what I've tried to do is start patients' meeting with a question, not about their medical self, but about their personal self. Is there anything you can't do now that you would do if you could breathe better? I used to ask that all the time. I found it really revealed to me what a patient's interested in doing. And the responses were all over the place, right? There was, I want to hang out with some friends. I want to chase my grandkids. I want to be a better spouse. I want to be a better husband or better wife. But these kind of answers, even if they're sort of basic questions, help me get patients to talk and reflect on the motivations that they had for getting a transplant or getting care in general. So we all know that the term fighting the disease and losing the battle are cliches, yet we still use them, but have we really failed if patients die? And words have power. Patients don't fail when they die. Providers don't fail when they can't ultimately prevent death. It's not failure. Unfortunately, it's part of our life cycle. And so all of this is to say that healthcare, the number one problem is that we're getting away from why many of us got into this in the first place. I've given a lot of talks in the last few years since my book came out, and I'm interacting with healthcare workers and patients. And they're not burnt out, as you read in the newspaper. They're burning mad. I find much more of them angry than I do technically burnt out, because it's not working for either caregivers or the people delivering, or the patients getting the care. So there are a lot of systemic problems in healthcare, as you know, but sometimes if you look at a particular case, it can shine the light on a bigger issue. Let me give you an example. Early in my transplant career, I approached a woman whose son had been declared brain dead. The family pastor who'd known Donald since he was a little boy quizzed me, trying to ascertain whether everything had been done to save the young man. The grieving mother didn't believe that there was no hope. She was vehement. She would not consent to organ donation. That was her position. At first, I was so invested in my own dying patients on the waiting list that I honestly couldn't understand why somebody wouldn't donate. But then it occurred to me that she may have suspected that we could have saved her son, but we chose not to. One of the issues we deal with. What she saw, she was a black woman, and I was a white doctor in a white coat, telling her that her son was dead when she could clearly see his heart was still beating. She didn't trust me, was the bottom line. But more than that, she didn't trust the medical establishment to do the right thing. And that was very revealing very early on in my career. And there's been a lot of press recently about, for instance, the Tuskegee syphilis study. Some of you may be familiar with it. It was a study that was done years ago, intentionally giving black patients syphilis to see what happened, more or less. And that began the historic mistreatment of people of color. And part of the reason that has to be addressed is in the storytelling. So getting back to what I do, organ donation, somebody can say, why don't more African Americans donate their organs? And the data tells us that people of color are less likely to donate their organs. But guess what? The stories tell you why. And so I bet when you leave here, you'll remember the story. You won't remember a bunch of data that I show up on the slide. So we get back to medicine and writing. So Glennon Doyle, one of my favorite authors, said, write from a scar, not an open wound. So we do need time to kind of process what happens with us. I mentioned that I stole this advice when I was writing my own book. And the reason I wanted to write the book was to tell the human stories of patients and the care team and to reveal what each is going through when we're trying to navigate this maze that we're now calling healthcare. And one of the big myths out there, and it's important for patients to understand this, is that doctors are superhuman. We're obviously not. Some are less superhuman than others. I think you would all agree. And those of us who chose a career in medicine do so because we want to heal people. When we aren't able to do that, it destabilizes us. It crushes our soul. And that's part of what I've thought a lot about since I left the front lines of transplant care. This is a long excerpt that I won't read to you, but the bottom line to all of this is you have to understand the realities of doing this kind of work. We stay up late at night with sick kids, we get cut off in traffic, we have fights with our colleagues. We bring all of that to our interaction with you, for better or for worse. That's what happens. So, to anyone involved with healthcare, a patient or not a patient, I urge you to consider writing your own stories. I've seen a lot of them popping up. COVID actually increased the volume of those stories. Not only the successes and the failures, the trials, the tribulations, what lessons did you learn as a patient, as a family member, and then share them with your friends. You don't have to publish them in a book. Just share them in your friends, because I think it's important for us to know your story. And when we tell stories about real people who interact with our healthcare system and suffer indignities, we reveal disparities. We reveal medical errors that happen. We're putting human faces on data and statistics that only stories can explain. We can read the data till we're blue in the face. It's never going to have the same impact. So, just to finish my part of the story, and I think you'll understand where I'm coming from a little bit better. I left Stanford, left the front lines of medicine, moved back to New Orleans, and sorry for the salty language, but New Orleans is a place where most people go to lose their shit. So I went there to get my shit back together. I'm a little different. I watched a good deal of Saints football. That helped most of the time. I opened up my consulting business. I coached 8th grade basketball. I found out who I was again, all in this city below sea level that they've tried to wash away about 100 times. But the most important thing in doing all this is I kept this box, and in that box was patient letters, pictures, anniversary notices, marriage notices. And when I missed the front lines of medicine, which I do, I pull this box out and really read what's in it, because that's really the essence of why I did what I did. Got up every morning, ready to go, no alarm clock. That was important to me. So when I got back to New Orleans, I'm almost done. When I got back from New Orleans, I had a lot of old friends still there from high school who knew me as a different guy. And they said, how was that job out there? And I answered with this passage from the book. I said, it was great, it was horrible, it was the best job in the world and devastating. I saw some great things happen and helped make some of those happen. I saw some horrible stuff as well, but it was the education of a lifetime. And they asked me, would you do it again? And I said, yes, without any hesitation. But first it'd be ice cream, Netflix, and a nap, and then I would get right to it. So I appreciate the opportunity for me to tell you a little bit about myself, but also hopefully make it clear that partner with your healthcare team, understand what they're going through, and in that way I think you're all going to get a better result. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Never did I think I would not be able to work because of my illness. Never did I think I would not be able to drive because my illness compromised my vision. Never did I think I would need help walking. Never did I think I would not be able to put on my own socks and shoes. Never did I think I would need a walker. Never did I think my mom would push me in a wheelchair. Never did I think I would gain 50 pounds in 2 months because of my medication. Never did I think I would actually feel a little down and maybe even depressed. Those were the words that came to my mind as I sat back and thought about me being diagnosed with interstitial lung disease. This was the end of 2018, and I was only 42 years old at that time. Yet this new diagnosis said I'd be dead in 5 years. So what comes to mind when we think about chronic, or when a doctor uses the word chronic? We think of no cure, sick, maybe even death. Well, when I heard the word chronic from my doctor, I heard death. And then I did what many people do, and I Googled it. Boy, was that bad. I Googled it, and if you've never Googled ILD and you have it, don't. It will tell you that the life expectancy is 3 to 5 years. So let's rewind. As stated, I had 10 years prior, I would get bronchitis during the winter months. And although in hindsight that seems a bit excessive, but I was never concerned. So in 2018, I was having another one of those bronchitis episodes, and I went to my primary doctor. While I was in his office, he performed an ultrasound on my neck and part of my chest. And as a result, he ordered an x-ray of my chest and my kidney area. He stated there appeared to be a spot on my kidney. So like a week or so later, I had an x-ray done. And when I went to his office for the results, he informed me that I did not have pneumonia or a spot on my kidney. He said it appears I have something called NSIP. I'd never heard of NSIP. It stood for nonspecific interstitial pneumonia. As he gave me the results, he literally was scrolling on his cell phone, Googling NSIP. So he and I both were confused. He told me, and this is exact quote, it was a different type of pneumonia and regular medication would not work. That's what he said. So I had been waiting 2 hours to be seen by him. I was feeling under the weather and very sick. So I demanded medication. I said, "You're going to give me something." So he ordered cough medicine and a Z-Pack. And that's what I left with. At this time, I happened to work for a federal qualified health center in Pennsylvania as a social worker. I went to work the next day and happened to talk to my colleague, an interstitial medicine physician. He instructed me to make an appointment right away with a pulmonologist, which I did. I'm a minister's child. I'm the youngest, and I like to say greatest, of my parents' 3 children. I have my brother here who I'm sure would shake his head no to being the greatest. I am. I went to college for 4 years. I went to grad school for 2 to actually pick a profession that was underpaid, understaffed, and underappreciated. I was a proud social worker. I was a good person. I belonged to a great sorority. I did community service. Yet when I fast forward, when I sat in the room with my doctor and mother, none of that mattered. I still had interstitial lung disease. So now I had to discuss this with my family. I didn't want to look in my mother's face. I did not want to see any signs of hurt, any pain in her face. I remember when I told my family about my lung disease, my father's face immediately showed concern. And my two older brothers had blank stares. Now, let me tell you, growing up with two older brothers, I've never seen them have a blank stare. So that moment showed something different. I was raised in an era, as has been stated prior, that we kept family business within the home. I was raised by a strong woman and a strong man, and they instilled that within my brothers and myself. So because of this, I knew discussing my diagnosis would be hard because we all felt the need to be strong. I was fortunate to have an amazing doctor and team of doctors who actually called my family in for the appointment to explain my disease. My mother was there when I received the diagnosis of ILD and NSIP diagnosis. So that was unfortunate and fortunate. I could not alter any information that was given. She heard everything. So because of this, we had a family conversation. Now, we're a very close family. My brothers and I have a text group that we text almost daily. He could tell you that is true. I hope he will say that is true. No. So this was good as the support, but also made me feel a bit sad because I had to tell them this information. Their reactions were very real, though. Both my parents and my brothers were supportive. They were scared and they were nervous, but they did a great job at remaining a positive support system for me. I asked them if they had any questions or any concerns. And once I joined the PFF Ambassadors class of 2023, I read my story to my family members, and I gave informational postcards to my extended family and friends. So that was able to give more knowledge to them. One statement that's so difficult to hear is, "You don't look sick." This statement can make you feel as though you shouldn't park in the handicap spot. You shouldn't wear oxygen. You shouldn't use your walker, wheelchair, or rollator. In a nutshell, it's not validating me or my feelings or anyone else's. I went to a Christian concert maybe a month or so ago, And I went with my mother and my sister-in-law. And I had my electric wheelchair with me, and I was waiting in line for a family bathroom. And there was another woman waiting with me. So another woman wanted to get in front of both of us, and she came up to me, walked right over top of me, looked down and said, "You don't even look sick. You don't even look like you need that." As my oxygen sat on my lap, but not physically on, she then pointed and said, "And I don't know why you even have that." So I'm going to be honest. Well, okay, I'm going to be a little honest. At first, I wanted to say a lot of things back. But I was at a Christian concert. So I smiled, and I said, "I actually have a lung disease, so my lungs are sick, so you can't see them." Now, my sister-in-law was a little bit more upset and wanted to say more, but we let it go. When I told that story to other folks within at the concert, they simply said, "It's good that you said something back and let her know that you do have that disease." Living with a chronic disease can be very scary. You see people die from the same disease you're living with. My pulmonologist gave me the website for Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, and through that site, I obtained educational material and different resources that were and remain extremely helpful in this journey. I also joined a support group through Facebook, and when I go to my support groups, it's a very high percentage that I will read about someone from the group passing away. Dealing with death does not get easy. Within the last few years, I've lost two very special people, my Aunt Jenny and my cousin Carol. They did not die from PF, but their deaths affected me tremendously. Because of this, I am learning to take nothing for granted. So out of all the things I heard my doctors say, I heard everyone is different. Every case is different, so that meant hope. So never did I think I would go to pulmonary rehab and crush it. Never did I think I would learn how to rearrange my life to fit the new one. Never did I think I would wear oxygen in public. Never did I think I would join a support group. Never did I think I would become my own client. Never did I think I would speak about my illness. Never did I think I would apply to become an ambassador for the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. And never did I think I would be speaking at the PFF Summit. Yet here I am, thinking all that I've said and happy to be crushing life with my family, friends, and support by my side. So even though you never thought it, it's okay. Just remember you can. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It sure is a joy for me to be here at my first summit. But I've been thinking, being in my 70s, there's some advantages, but there's clearly been one dramatic downside. I can now reflect on my past, and I can see where a lot of certain life-changing events really felt disastrous at that time. But they turned out, in hindsight, to really hold a lot of opportunity and blessings for me. One such moment was when I got diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. I'm pleased to be one of the 2022 Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation ambassadors. I was invited to share my story today with you, including what really motivated me to become an ambassador. And I'm going to describe what's writing my IPF story and being involved with the foundation and the staff has provided me. My story begins in the fall of 2022 with my annual physical. And my primary doctor listened to my lungs, and he said, everything sounds fine. And then he said, is there anything else you want to report or share? And if I hadn't kicked up some clear phlegm, maybe that morning I might not have said anything. But I said, you mentioned it, I've had this weird dry cough. It's really been infrequent, but it's been going on for a couple months, and I've never really had any lung issues. In fact, when I go to my physical, I'd have low blood pressure and absolutely no medications when I was 70. So I'm really glad I spoke up about it, because my path to the disease would have been so much different if I hadn't. He ordered a CT scan, and that was inconclusive, and that was followed up with biopsy about 5 months later. And sure enough, I'd seen the pictures. The biopsy confirmed that I had IPF. But to my surprise, my pulmonologist, who I'd been referred to, and my wife was with me during the Zoom call, said, in addition to that, you've got a small cancerous tumor in your left lung. And my thought was, is there any such a thing as a small amount of cancer? And we got off the call, and we both had a really good cry. But lo and behold, a month later, I got a PET scan to see if the cancer was anywhere else. And I'm walking to a lunch meeting with a friend. I remember exactly where on the street I was when I got this call, and it was my new oncologist. And he said, "I've got good news." And I said, "Wow, I could really use some right now." And he said, "Well, there's no cancer in your lymph nodes, there's no cancer elsewhere in your body." And I said, "Oh, that's so great." He goes, "But I've never seen this before in my practice." And I said, "What?" He goes, "We can't find the cancer in the PT scan." I said, "What? That's miraculous. Can you give an idea how that's possible?" And his theory was that the surgeon went in and blindly removed the cancer with a biopsy. It was less than an inch long. So my next thought was, anything's possible. Well, I was prescribed anti-fibrotic medication, and I've been really fortunate to tolerate that drug that's really, slowed the scarring of my alveoli. At that time, I had no idea what idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis was, IPF, as commonly known, nor did I know what idiopathic meant. And I did learn, the term means that the source of my disease is unknown. I'd never been a smoker, so it was really a mystery. So then shortly after my diagnosis, I knew that what I wanted to do is begin searching for as much information as I could possibly find about the disease. And like has all been said, the prognosis on the website that I visited right away of 3 to 5 years was really shocking to both me and my wife. But thankfully, soon after that, I found the foundation's website, and I found acronym information, and I found resources that could really help me. And early on in my process, I realized it was critical for me to be my own best advocate and learn as much about this disease as I could and take charge of my own treatment plan. So my research led me to investigate silent reflux. I had a friend that was a acupuncture expert, and he found out about this, and I went into investigation. But sure enough, when I went to my new ENT doctor, I had classic information, and I got confirmed I had this issue. So I got on medication, and I changed my diet, and that eliminated the silent reflux that had been harming my lungs for probably years. And I know that knowledge is power. But through the PFF, I learned that one of the nation's best pulmonary departments was right there in Sacramento, UC Davis Health in Sacramento. And fortunately, it was right in my backyard. So I got accepted into their pulmonary rehab program. It was rigorous. And over 8 weeks, I worked out aerobically on treadmill and bicycle. I went into a strength training program. And there was also an educational component. It was there that I learned about how important education and nutrition are, and also about pacing myself and planning ahead as I live with this disease. So I was told that there was a psychological spiral that occurs with PFF, and as it becomes worse and breathing becomes more difficult and oxygen is necessary, there's a tendency to reduce your activity and your daily movement, and as a result, the disease can rapidly, increase. So I knew I had to exercise every day. And I'm continuing to go to the UCD's maintenance program in their pulmonary rehab department on a weekly basis. And additionally, we do a lot of walking because we've got a 200-acre park that's really near our house. I committed a year ago, in addition to this, to a daily Qigong practice. I'd like to share a little bit about that with you. Some of you may be probably wondering, what is Qigong? Well, it's thousands of years old. It's a component, getting a little dry up here. It's a component in traditional Chinese medicine. And Qigong's safe and gentle exercises are done along with movement within the upper body. And what they do is they have a goal of improving and maintaining your health and well-being. and I do Qigong every morning first thing. I breathe deeply for an hour while I'm doing these movements in kind of meditative state, and I always come away feeling energized, and it seems to propel me, through the entire day. If it sounds interesting, you might want to know more. I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. But next, I'd like to talk about a community of support. The PFF website also directed me to the Central Valley PF support group. And there I've gained great insight from listening to my peers. Some of them have been with the disease for over 10 years, and I really look forward to every one of these meetings every month. I have an excellent medical team. In fact, my pulmonary doctor surprised me at the San Francisco walk. She brought her dog and a bunch of her staff from UC Davis Health. So I've got my PF support group, my ambassador family, a circle of friends, a great medical team, and a loving wife who supports me in going forward. After I produced the first Sacramento walk for PFF, I decided I want to do more for the foundation, in addition to raising money at the annual walk. And I've done that for 3 years. I learned of the ambassador program on the website, I applied, and I got selected last summer. The role of the volunteer ambassador is to convey our life experience to a variety of different audiences: researchers, doctors, support groups, patients, some newly diagnosed, and also caregivers. And to increase public awareness of PF and for more investment in research in our common goal to find a cure for PF. And we do this through speaking engagements and also interviews with the media. I've enjoyed the excellent training that I got from the foundation through their speechwriter, their professional speechwriter, and also their public speaking coach. But I felt challenged. I felt challenged when I had to deliver my speech in 3 and 5 and 10-minute increments. But writing out my story in that way seemed to offer me a different lens about which to view my disease and also my healthcare plan. It's been wonderful to develop the friendships with the ambassadors. Everybody's story is so different, and it's been a rich experience to really, get to know them all. Serving in this capacity, I've learned to focus on what it is in my story that I can impart that can be valued in my audience. And I think there's supposed to be a slide. Here are my 3 most important keys for resilience. Be your own best advocate. Even when I got COVID, it took me a couple months, and I had to make a lot of noise to get medication to get me free of this cough that we actually caught it traveling back from Nova Scotia. But really, this continues to go on today. Commit to a strong exercise program. Don't give up. And connect with a caring community of yours that supports you fully. Let me ask by a show of hands, any ambassadors in the room out there today? Great. So, there are 35 ambassadors here at the summit. We don't have ambassadors' labels on our name badges, but if you're near one, and ask about their story and have them share with you what their experience has been like. I did survey some of my fellow ambassadors before I came up here today. So I asked them one question: what has your experience as an ambassador given you? So here's what they had to say. Sam said, it's given him the power to help others realize that they aren't alone on this journey. And Rick replied, it has allowed him the platform to spread awareness regarding the role and the challenges of being a caregiver. And Melissa, who was my mentor, conveyed it gave her power and hope. If I was asked to come up with one word to describe what the program has given me, I'd say empowerment. Without a doubt, I know I have IPF, but I also know the disease doesn't define who I am. But you don't have to be a PFF ambassador to gain great value from formalizing your story on paper. At any point in time, you can draft a version of your story and your experience with PF. Then it'll be there in your mind to share with your doctors, your family, your friends. And you can also draw upon it when you're talking to someone in your circle about what pulmonary fibrosis is and how you're living with it. I just encourage you to give it a try. My story is just one within the PF community, But your story is unique and equally important. I encourage you to apply to be a PFF ambassador if this opportunity to volunteer resonates with you. And there's staff here. I'd point you towards Jamie at the back of the room in terms of talking to Jamie about the program. I'm staying active, and I'm really fortunate to be doing this very well. I'm extremely grateful for PFF's efforts to accelerate research and provide education and support for all of us. And I so appreciate the foundation is going to continue with the ambassador program for all over the United States. I've got a friend up in Alaska. Hey, Pete, I know you're watching. When I was diagnosed with IPF, I went out and got my first tattoo. I asked the guy, he'd been doing the tattoos for 3 years. I said, you have very many people coming in 70 with tattoos? He goes, no, you're the first. It's here on my left forearm. I get to see it every morning when I wake up first thing. It says, making every breath count. A positive attitude of resilience is everything. Each breath is precious, but so are each of you. Together we'll accomplish our goal, a world without pulmonary fibrosis. The Chinese philosopher Yao Zheng said, the journey of 1,000 steps begins with one step. Well, that's true because you're not going to get anywhere unless you start. I sure didn't see this journey coming. But I know I'm not on it alone. I wish you well on your journey, and may you have many moments of happiness and joy along your way. Thanks.
I'm going to welcome you all to this session on narrative medicine. I'm Amy Hajari Case. As I said, I'm from Piedmont Healthcare in Atlanta, Georgia, and I also work for the Piedmont Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation as a senior medical advisor for education and awareness. I'm excited to be sharing this experience in this session with you all on narrative. I just want to take a couple of minutes before I introduce our first speaker to frame the concept of narrative by sharing kind of a silly example about how it can be helpful. And so we'll start with a little bit of history. We're going to go back to my high school AP US history class, and I've actually never really been one for random facts, which is what I always felt like history was, just this sort of random, had to memorize this date and this battle and the sharp end was for sticking, and it, it never really stuck for me. But I liked math problems. You could kind of figure it out. You could follow something through. It made way more sense. The history class really felt like this just sort of series of numbers and dates and people, and I never got it, right? So there was me in the middle of class, like could not remember any of this stuff, and it was probably my worst AP exam, I'm just gonna say. So Schoolhouse Rock, if you guys remember in the Wayback Machine, our Saturday morning cartoon breaks in the 1980s tried to help with some of this, some cute animations, some catchy tunes, and bite-sized stories. So I did remember some of that. No More Kings, The Shot Heard Round the World, did not get me a great score on the test. And then this guy came along. Does anybody know who this is? Right, everybody knows who this is. Hamilton opened on Broadway in 2015 and became a worldwide phenomenon that is still touring the globe today. And after that, all the theater kids were getting great grades in history, U.S. history. We could all remember it. But it wasn't just the catchy tunes, right? It was the moments that hung between all of the facts, right? This may have been a made-up moment, right? It could be fake, but it felt real. And we saw Hamilton go through all of these moments in his life and his career, from romance to work to war to loss. And now we remember those things because we can hang the facts on his story that sticks with us. And so I think of this as I'm seeing patients in clinic, and I have reviewed a lot of facts. I've seen a CT scan and a PFT, and maybe I know about some testing. But what I want to know is, what's your story? Where do I hang those facts so that I can put them together in a narrative that makes sense and helps me to know you and help you, right? So narrative is really powerful, and we use it for a lot of different purposes in our lives. With our kids, we call it storytelling. If we're in church or in court, we call it testimony. And in medicine, we call it our history of present illness, but it can mean a lot and can be very powerful. And so while you're listening to these stories, I want you to think about your own narrative and what it is and how you hang those facts together and how you can use that narrative for your own self and advocacy, but for the rest of the world around you as well. And how can the rest of those people benefit from your story too?